Stifling pressure loomed in the air. Stifling pressure loomed in the air. 4 holiness of nirvanas from Emperor Xia's realm descended, with 3 being the Sword Master of Lihan, the Palace Lord of Xianyuan Palace, and the Master of the Jiutian Temple. All 3 holiness of nirvanas were not direct subordinates of Emperor Xia. However, they received the orders and showed up to help nonetheless. There were members of those 3 major top-notch forces of Emperor Xia following Yi Futian. Emperor Xia asked personally, and Xia Qingyuan had also visited all of them, requesting their aid. There was no way they could have refused. The holiness of nirvanas, who served Emperor Xia, needed to fend off Emperor Li's realm. The conflict between the 2 imperial realms continued, and they were unable to be assigned elsewhere. The Sword Master of Lihan and the others would not have been on the trip for long. They would have soon returned to Emperor Xia's realm to guard the realm against a possible invasion from Dali. Zhu Kong, Zhong Lu, and 1 other holiness of nirvana turned glum when they saw the others in the air. Xia Qingyuan had returned to Emperor Xia's realm and summoned 3 other holiness of nirvanas to join the fight. Furthermore, things were different from what was expected before. They all thought that so long as they were able to kill Yi Futian and gain the relics of Emperor Qua, the 9 tribes would be able to reach new heights. Even without Wu Yong around, there were still the other 8 tribes. With 8 holiness of nirvanas standing together, even if Emperor Xia were to put over half of the holiness of nirvanas from Emperor Xia's realm to work, they would still be able to resist. Moreover, the ones involved were more than just the 9 tribes. What took place next was laid out for all to see. The 9 tribes splintered right there, and then instead, all the other mighty ones had either died or apologized for their trespassing. Other than those from the ancient imperial city, only 3 tribes were taking the brunt of it all. As such, they had to deal with 3 more holiness of nirvanas from Emperor Xia's realm and an army before they were able to take down the other 3 opposing tribes. All of that was nothing short of a disaster for them. It was 6 holiness of nirvanas against 3 by then. Worse still, those 3 tribes were not all that much powerful compared to the opposing 3, and there was no way those 3 holiness of nirvanas from Emperor Xia's realm could have been weak. It was clear which side would emerge as the winning side by then. The 3 opposing tribes were elated instead. Zhu Kong and his people had been cornering them for quite a while, wanting to stage a showdown. With the forces from Emperor Xia's realm there, everything would have come to a close by then. The 9 tribes of the past were destined to be in history books. The tribes would have emerged in a new form in Crimson Dragon realm from then on out. Sword will whooshed about in the air. The Sword Master of Lihan lashed out immediately. His sword tore through the air as it came down on Zhu Kong. Zhu Kong sensed the might of that sword and burst in retreat. However, the Vermilion Bird tribe leader quickly rose from below. By then, no mighty ones would have wasted their time talking about rules of engagement. They were all out to take down Zhu Kong and his people. The Palace Lord of Xianyuan Palace stepped out with the footwork of Xianyuan, placing a lockdown in their surroundings. Their surroundings became stifling, and everyone was able to sense a looming heavenly pressure. He stepped out and headed towards Zhong Lu, the Zhong tribe leader. His steps rattled the skies. Zhong Lu conjured the Chonglu battle form. All 11 layers burst at the same time. His body became extremely massive, and then he threw a punch at the Palace Lord of Xianyuan, who was coming down on them. The 2 forces clashed in the air, causing a raging current to sweep all over the place. Everyone else was sent flying. The Nanli tribe leader lashed out at Zhong Lu at the same time. 6 holiness of nirvanas were taking on 3 of their counterparts. It was 2 against 1 by then, which proved more than enough to hold those outnumbered fighters back. The fighting broke out in an instant. The army of Emperor Xia's realm joined hands with the mighty ones from Nanli tribe, the Bailey tribe, and the Vermilion Bird tribe against those from the other 3. Xia Qingyuan stood high in the air, and there were mighty ones surrounding her for protection. She stared at the battlefield with cold eyes. The incident was caused by the 9 tribes, and that was where it would have ended. The era of the 9 tribes was to end on that very day. There were spectators from afar watching the battle. It felt the skies and the earth were going to break. Their minds trembled violently, and they all knew a storm was coming. Things were about to change for good. "Grandfather, help me." A shrilled shriek was heard, causing Zhu Kong to be shaken. However, he was being surrounded by swords from the sword master of Lihen, and the Vermilion Bird tribe leader was lashing out from the side as well. His hands were full, and things looked dire. There was simply no way he had time to spare for others. Zhu Kong's face turned pale, and he felt rather unsettled. It was more than just his life at stake. It was something that concerned the life and death of his tribe. There was no way he could have just shrugged it aside. Despite having reached the highest of planes, he was unable to become absolutely cold and unfeeling. PFFTT. A sword streaked by, making a gash on Zhu Kong's body. He felt as if his soul had been cut. His face turned even paler as he found that his arm had almost been cut off. "You dare ally with outsiders and treat your fellow members of the 9 tribes like that?" Zhu Kong shouted as he lashed out at the Vermilion Bird tribe leader. "If you still have the interests of the 9 tribes in mind, then you shall heed the final orders of Emperor Qua," the Vermilion Bird tribe leader replied. Zhu Kong was rendered speechless. He was not the only one in a predicament. The other 2 who allied with him were also having a hard time. From outside came faint streaks. Zhu Kong's eyes were reddened, and they did not become like this just from the flames. Yet another flash of the sword streaked through his chest. His clothes were blood-stained, and his face was pale as he let out a frustrated roar. "I'm willing to surrender." "Cease the fighting immediately," Zhu Kong roared. His voice reverberated throughout their surroundings. Terrifying swords that streaked about stopped moving immediately, hovering around him. The Vermilion Bird tribe leader stopped attacking as well. The other 2 Holiness of Nirvanas knew from Zhu Kong's voice that there was no way to turn the tides. If they were to simply keep fighting, other than ending up dead on the battlefield, their respective tribes would have also been slaughtered. Xia Qingyuan was not there to bluff when she brought the army with her. She was truly there to end things. She did not bother showing mercy to her enemies, and every move she had taken was meant to deal a heavy blow on her enemies. The fighting all over the battlefield gradually ceased, then stopped altogether. However, the mighty ones from the overwhelmed 3 tribes were still being surrounded. Everyone was waiting for Xia Qingyuan's orders. Countless pairs of eyes looked up at the woman in the air. Her eyes were cold, and her face was emotionless. 7 Holiness of Nirvanas had led the elites from their 7 tribes, and descended upon Qianya City back then, looking grand and marvelous, as they were out to kill Yi Futian, and rob him of his lineage. At that moment, she had the intention to let those 3 tribes feel what her side had felt back then. "Cripple them for the time being," Xia Qingyuan said coldly. "You." Zhu Kong and the others looked up at Xia Qingyuan. Their eyes were filled with cold anger, and the aura from their bodies was extremely cold. "Resist, and we shall take you people as just pretending to surrender, and we shall kill all of you on the spot without further consideration for surrender." Xia Qingyuan's voice was overbearing, giving no chance to those 3 tribes. If they resisted, they would not have another chance to surrender, and they would have been killed on the spot instead. The 3 Holiness of Nirvanas looked extremely glum. They had never suffered greater humiliation before. Furthermore, if they were to be crippled even only for the time being, they would have been akin to meat on a chopping board. They would not have been able to even object to whatever Xia Qingyuan would have done to them. They would have been rendered utterly helpless. But then again, there was no option for objection. Xia Qingyuan had laid down the word, "Kill any who resist." The mighty ones from the 3 tribes siding with Emperor Xia's realm shuddered as well. The fight was against Yi Futian, and they all seemed to have ignored Xia Qingyuan's determination altogether. The genius of a princess from Emperor Xia's realm was still a descendant of a Run Huang, after all. That anger in her was about to cut off all means of escape for the opposing 3 tribes. They claimed to be unwilling to submit to outsiders. And at the moment, it was more than just submitting to outsiders from those 3 losing sides. "We have expressed our willingness to surrender. Don't take things too far, princess," Zhu Kong said. "Losers have no right to negotiate. Dead or alive, the choice is yours," Xia Qingyuan retorted in an overbearing manner, and did not bother to say more. She then continued, "Do it. Now you want to talk about the dignity of Holiness of Nirvanas? Are you all still dreaming?" Zhu Kong and the rest of his people shuddered slightly. It was no longer simply an insult. It was as Xia Qingyuan put it, losers had no right to negotiate. Xia Qingyuan did not bother even giving them a chance. If they chose to live, then they would have to cast everything aside. If they chose death, then they could at least die standing. The Swordmaster of Lihan gathered his sword wills and flashed, heading straight for Zhu Kong. Two other Holiness of Nirvanas acted at the same time as well, heading towards the ones they were fighting before, bringing terrifying power to bear. Zhu Kong lifted his head up to look at the sky. The Swordmaster of Lihan was getting increasingly close, and the sword wills were towering. Zhu Kong clenched his fists, and the aura about him roared. Leader! A cracking noise was heard soon after. Zhu Kong felt his heart bleeding. Zhu Kong had been akin to a de facto leader of the 9 tribes, and he was about to end up as such at the moment. The Swordmaster of Lihan was getting increasingly close. Sword wills buried his body, and the flames on Zhu Kong's body roared. He then closed his eyes, and the towering flames were snuffed out immediately, disappearing without a trace. It was clear that he had made his choice. The Swordmaster of Lihan pointed, and countless sword will penetrated his body. The attack was not meant to kill him, and it would not have gotten rid of all his training. It was simply meant to cripple him for the time being. Sword will burst through Zhu Kong, destroying everything in his body. He grunted, and blood spilled from his mouth. His aura weakened rapidly. The 2 Holiness of Nirvanas made their choices as well. Like Zhu Kong, they did not choose to resist. The Palace Lord of Xianyuan Palace landed heavy blows with his fists on Zhonglu's battle form, shattering it, and causing Zhonglu to feel as if his internal organs had all been destroyed. He returned to his original state, and his aura weakened just as rapidly. The same happened with the Raven tribe leader. All 3 Holiness of Nirvanas were cripples at that very moment. The 3 who attacked them did not bother showing any mercy. Haul all 3 of them back to Emperor Xia's realm. All people from their tribes are to ruled by the Nanli tribe, the Vermilion Bird tribe, and the Bailey tribe, Xia Qingyuan ordered. Zhu Kong and the rest were ashen. What she did was akin to tearing their tribes apart. Xia Qingyuan intended to have them work for Emperor Xia's realm, and she made sure that they would not have any thoughts of rebellion. It was immensely brutal. Emperor Xia's realm was not Crimson Dragon realm. It was the turf of Emperor Xia. As prisoners of war and people who surrendered, they were obliged to do whatever was commanded of them. Emperor Xia would have killed them without question otherwise. Furthermore, there was no escape for them at all. Their tribe members were all being controlled in Crimson Dragon realm. Other than that, the Nanli tribe, the Vermilion Bird tribe, and the Bailey tribe have been training for years in Crimson Dragon realm. I assume that you all lacked communication with the outside world. I now offer an opportunity for members of the 3 tribes to train for a time in Emperor Xia's realm. What do you think? Xia Qingyuan then continued, the safety of your people will be taken care of in Emperor Xia's realm. There was no one present who did not understand what Xia Qingyuan meant. That was to say that she wanted the hostages to be at Emperor Xia's realm. Xia Qingyuan did not trust them. But then again, that was totally within reason. The 3 had headed to Qianya City with Zhu Kong before, after all. They had only turned against him and sided with Futian after finding out that things were not in their favor. There was no way Xia Qingyuan would have trusted them completely. No one had noticed that princess from Emperor Xia's realm before. From the looks of things at present, it was obvious that she was someone decisive and brutal as well. Furthermore, one who did not bother giving face. However, only by doing so would she have been able to ensure that the tribes would not betray her and threaten Futian. From her standpoint, she was naturally doing this for the sake of Qianya City, or for Futian. They had decided to submit, and it was time for them to show that they were sincere about it. Fine, the Bailey tribe leader said. This is my son Bailey Chuan, and he has not been a saint for long. He will bring some of his men to Emperor Xia's realm, and I hope you will be able to look after them. You have my word. Xia Qingyuan looked at the Bailey tribe leader and nodded. What a fox! The Nanli tribe leader cursed deep down. The Bailey tribe had never attempted to actually do anything against Futian, and at that moment, their tribe leader was also the first to express willingness to cooperate. He had to admit that the old fox was indeed cunning. Among the old 9 tribes, it would have probably been the Bailey tribe leader that Yi Futian would have trusted most, after Wu Yong. The Bailey tribe leader had shown that he was being sincere, and the other tribes did the same naturally, sending important figures to Emperor Xia's realm. With that, all 9 tribes were then completely put under the rule of Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The Swordmaster of Lihan and the others brought Zhu Kong and all those with him back to Emperor Xia's realm. Zhu Kong and the 2 other Holiness of Nirvanas suffered severe damage. They lost their combat capacity, for the time being, making it impossible for them to play any tricks during the journey. The Swordmaster of Lihan and the others brought Zhu Kong and all those with him back to Emperor Xia's realm. Zhu Kong and the 2 other Holiness of Nirvanas suffered severe damage. They lost their combat capacity, for the time being, making it impossible for them to play any tricks during the journey. When they reached Emperor Xia's realm, their tribesmen were being ruled by those from the Nanli tribe and the other 2 tribes, which made it even more unlikely for them to do anything. Worse still, there were also many from the Nanli tribe, the Bailey tribe, and the Vermilion Bird tribe heading towards Emperor Xia's realm. With deterrence being everywhere, none would have dared to harbor any thoughts of doing anything nasty. They simply did as they were told. The trip was more than enough to bolster the top-notch combat prowess of Emperor Xia's realm, as they were able to force Zhu Kong and the other 2 Holiness of Nirvanas to participate in the conflict with Dali. It was a 2 birds with 1 stone scenario for Emperor Xia's realm. Xia Qingyuan naturally stayed behind in Crimson Dragon realm, instead of returning with the others. They all would have probably needed quite some time to recover from the incident with the 9 tribes. The tribes that lost their Holiness of Nirvanas had only one way out if they were to rise again. That one way was to submit to Yi Futian and gain his trust, eventually having him impart the lineage of Emperor Kwa to them. Only by doing so would they be able to have a chance of seeing Holiness of Nirvanas rising among their ranks again. If they were to continue resenting him, those tribes would probably never be able to see their past glory return, and would entirely fall apart until they were absorbed and assimilated into tribes that Yi Futian came to trust. There had been competitions between the 9 tribes throughout the ages. All of them wanted to be the one to unify the 9 tribes. Any who got the chance to be at the top calling the shots would never show mercy to the other tribes. The Bailey tribe, the Nanli tribe, and the Vermilion Bird tribe shall rule the 9 tribes of the past from here on out. You all shall be responsible for restoring order, and when you're done, core members shall be given direct access to Emperor Kwa's city and restore the Emperor Kwa's hall. Yi Futian, city lord of Qinya City, shall impart the powers of Emperor Kwa as the lord of Emperor Kwa's hall. The 9 tribes shall then follow orders issued within the hall. Xia Qingyuan spoke to the mighty ones from the 3 tribes after sending off the ones heading off to Emperor Xia's realm. Yes, princess. Everyone nodded and did not object. They all submitted to Yi Futian, and it was only natural that he be made the lord of the Emperor Kwa's hall when the place was restored. The 9 tribes were, in a certain sense of the word, united as a single entity again. However, it was not through having one of the tribes absorbing and assimilating all the others. Still, that one person was inheriting Emperor Kwa's lineage and passing it all down the generations from that on out. It was as if everything was as fate ordained. The 3 of you shall be the first generation of elders of Emperor Kwa's hall. Any within the 9 tribes whom you find to be insubordinate, you're permitted to enforce the law and execute them. Xia Qingyuan continued. She was concerned with rebellions in the tribes, and under such circumstances, a heavy-handed approach was necessary. The 3 Holiness of Nirvanas naturally understood and nodded. They too were not merciful people. They would not have decided right away to submit to Yi Futian when things were not in their favor otherwise. All of them were very decisive and action-oriented people. Keep a close eye on those from the Wu clan who rebelled. Leave them be and let their leader deal with them, Xia Qingyuan added. Those who rebelled and chose to follow Zhu Kong back then turned pale when they heard what she said. Wu Yong had become an absolute member of Yi Futian's inner circle then. They wondered what their leader would have done with rebels like them. Even if Wu Yong chose to spare them, there was no way they would have been placed in prominent positions and given important tasks from then on out. They would have been marginalized, standing at the sidelines as they no longer had a leader. They would probably be reduced to serve at the very bottom of the hierarchy among the tribes. Xia Qingyuan then departed right away after she was done with affairs over there, returning to Qinya City. She believed that the three holiness of nirvanas of those three tribes would be able to handle things well there. With all 9 tribes united again, they would not pose a looming threat anymore. Among those who worked against them, some died, and some chose to switch sides. The only problem, then, was the ancient imperial city, with the city lord of ancient imperial city, the 9th servant, being lauded as the number 1 city lord, and a supreme being among the holiness of nirvanas. It would be challenging to deal with him at the moment. If he were to be sufficiently angered, he might have simply gone on a killing spree in Qinya City, and no one would have been able to stop a holiness of nirvana like him, who was at the pinnacle of the plane. There were times where numbers did not matter before one who had overwhelmingly powerful training. For instance, people like Yu Sheng and Yi Futian could not be dealt with by having more people gang up on them. Xia Qingyuan would not make a move against ancient imperial city. That part was left to Yi Futian. When the news about things regarding the 9 tribes at the western region of Crimson Dragon Realm spread, countless were astonished. The princess from Emperor Xia's realm was, without a doubt, a tough character in her own right. Not only had she been able to take out all 9 tribes and dealt with them once and for all, but she had even managed to dismantle any lurking threats on the spot, putting all 9 tribes securely in control and making sure everyone would play nice. She ensured that everyone would take Yi Futian's orders obediently. Many came to wonder if Yi Futian was the son-in-law of Emperor Xia's realm. They also wondered if Xia Qingyuan was doing all of that because they pissed off her boyfriend. The rebuilding of the city lord's offices area in Qinya City was underway, making the place look even more magnificent and grand than it used to be, especially the city lord's office itself. A grand matrix was even laid in the place. It was as if the city lord's office had to be more magnificent than it had last been after the destruction it suffered. It was like Qinya City itself, where after destruction suffered, the rebuilt city lord's office would be even more powerful than before. It was no exception at that time as well. Without including forces from Emperor Xia's realm, there had only been one holiness of nirvana guarding the place before, Shen Tianzhan, the former city lord. At present, other than Shen Tianzhan, there was also Wu Yong. Furthermore, among the 9 tribes that Qinya City came to rule, there were also 3 holiness of nirvanas and many more unblemished saints. Other than that, Yin Yuan was also present in the city lord's office, and there was also the star-plucking saint, who aided them secretly. It was as if everything was different after fighting a grand battle. Qinya City seemed to have become the 2nd most powerful city outside of Crimson Dragon City. Ancient Imperial City remained the number 1 city. Qinya City's current power was such that other than Ancient Imperial City, there were indeed no other cities capable of standing against it. There had never been a city able to rise to such prominence in such a short period. Qinya City was seen as a miracle. Yi Futian finally rose from his coma on that day. He had been asleep all the while. All his injuries had been amply repaired, so much so that he was almost completely healed. Lulan Shui, Little Butterfly, and Zhuge Mingyue had been taking care of him throughout the time. Even Long Linger stayed by his side without doing anything funny. Many smiled when Yi Futian came to. The burden on their shoulders was finally lifted. While Su Chehan had long determined that Yi Futian would be all right, if he were to stay in a coma, no one would have been able to rest easy. Why the hell are you people looking at me like that? Yi Futian shrugged when he saw the familiar faces around him, asking with a smile. I assume you slept well? Zhuge Mingyue smiled sheepishly at him. Yeah, right. For some guy who had been sleeping for months, you're the one to talk, she thought. Yeah, second sister. It's been a while since I slept so well, Yi Futian said in a joking tone. It'd be weird if you weren't sleeping well when there's so many watching over you, Zhuge Mingyue then quipped. Yi Futian did not say anything else, feeling warm deep down. All of those familiar faces were people he considered family, other than feeling warm inside. He also felt a sense of responsibility after seeing how nervous they were. He knew that he was the center of everything as far as they were concerned. That meant that he was shouldering the fate of everyone there. There were many people in the world worthy of his protection. They were all looking out for each other. I'll get some air outside. Yi Futian rose and walked outside. Long Linger came and helped him up, lifting her head and looking at him, asking, "Are you feeling all right, brother?" "Relax, I'm fine," Yi Futian smiled and said, but he swore deep down that he would never pull anything like that again. It would really kill him. If it had not been for the protection afforded by his life spirit and the imperial will, what he pulled would have easily burned through 10 lives. He came to the compound after walking out of the room. Yi Futian looked up at the blinding sun and felt he needed to adjust to things. "How are things out there now?" Yi Futian asked. Xia Qingyuan came to his side and elaborated on everything that had happened to him. Yi Futian nodded and said, "Thanks a lot." Xia Qingyuan did not say anything. She then asked after a while, "Do you think there is more to be done with the Shi clan?" The Saint Lord of Juyang had wanted to be part of the fight back then, but he switched sides and helped them kill the Ju tribe leader. Xia Qingyuan was asking if he would like to settle the score further. "We'll talk about this later," Yi Futian answered. He turned his eyes forward, seeing a figure that stood out of the crowd like a sore thumb, getting ready to leave. "Brother Yan," Yi Futian called. Yan Yuan halted his steps and turned around, saying, "Now that you're awake, things in Qinya City would be fine, and I'd need to head back. I'm sure Fei Xue and the others are waiting for news from me for the past several months. Now that you're in Crimson Dragon Realm, why not stay here at Qinya City instead, brother?" Yi Futian asked. "If you're concerned with the teacher's reputation, there is no need for you to stay in the city lord's office. It would suffice if you just stayed in the city for training. Fei Xue would be safer here. Things at Dali Dynasty are still a threat after all. If anything were to happen, we would be able to do something to back you up," Yi Futian said. Yan Yuan felt rather concerned. Dali was indeed a lurking threat. There was no telling who from Dali would act against them. Dali might have gotten into some conflicts with Emperor Xia's realm, with both sides being of equal strength, unable to overwhelm the other. However, there was no telling what would have happened in the future. "I've set up Qinya Academy in the city. You could stay there in seclusion and train. If you run into any decent candidates worthy of your teaching, it would be just like how it was with Dali Academy back then. You'd still be inheriting the will of our teacher," Yi Futian then added. Yan Yuan sported a ponderous look and said, "I'll ask what Fei Xue thinks about this when I return." "Very well." Yi Futian smiled and nodded. Yan Yuan then left for the city lord's office. "Sir Yan Yuan is indeed someone worthy of respect." Xia Qingyuan walked up to him and said, "It was a pity that there was no way Yan Yuan would join Emperor Xia's realm, due to concerns over his teacher's reputation. Despite the regime having permanently crippled the imperial advisor and imprisoning him for treason, his students refused to admit to those charges. They would not allow themselves to confirm that their teacher had been a traitor. The imperial advisor and the students of his are all worthy of respect," Yi Futian added. News came after Yi Futian came to. They were figures from top-notch forces coming to visit him afterward. Shi Chan, daughter of the Shi clan, came to apologize personally at Qinya City and brought many gifts. Yi Futian saw no reason not to accept them in good faith. He considered the score settled, and that was final. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Qinya City regained its usual calm and peace after all the commotion before. Qinya City regained its usual calm and peace after all the commotion before. Even though everyone came to learn that Yi Futian had acquired Emperor Qua's lineage, they dared not show up and try to take it away by force. The battle on the very first day of year 10025 of Divine Prefecture calendar saw 7 tribes laying siege to Qinya City. Several top-notch figures participated in the invasion. Even so, they did not manage to take down Qinya City. The city had become even more powerful than it had been in the past, and no one dared re-challenge them. The rise of Yi Futian was probably unstoppable. Many came to agree among themselves that among the many cities outside of Crimson Dragon City, ancient Imperial City was number 1 while Qinya City was number 2. In the area where Vice City Lord Shen Tianzhan had taken up residence within the City Lord's office's vicinity, Shen Jun was training especially hard. Other than training on his own to deepen his comprehension and understanding, he had also sparred with the ones from the City Lord's office often. Every single session saw him being thoroughly exhausted by the end, and the sessions did not stop until he was injured. At that moment, Shen Tianzhan was standing at the side of the huge platform, watching Shen Jun fight on it. He witnessed personally how Shen Jun was beaten until he spat up blood, yet he continued to fight nonetheless. The sparring stopped after quite a while before he walked towards Shen Tianzhan, bowing and greeting, "Father. Training should always be done in moderation. There is no need to keep wanting to break one's limit," Shen Tianzhan said. He naturally realized that Shen Jun changed. His son's vista changed. Shen Jun, back in the past, had always limited his vista to merely being the lord of a city, wanting to be nothing else, and that his goal was simply to inherit his father's Qinya City. However, one's environment had a profound impact on one's outlook and growth. Yi Futian's emergence broadened Shen Jun's horizons, letting him know what it meant when someone said that there was always something or someone bigger out there. Shen Jun recalled what he had been doing in the past, and found that he was ridiculous. He had only wanted to dupe Yi Futian into participating in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon, allowing him to win the gamble. However, Yi Futian did things in a vastly different manner when he became City Lord of Qinya City. What he did, and what Yi Futian was were not even of the same level altogether, and that left a profound impact on him. After experiencing the past battles firsthand, he truly realized that the Saint Plain was only the beginning instead of the end. "I understand, Father, but doing battle allows me to keep bringing out my potential and put it to good use." Shen Jun replied, "I shall return to my training." "Very well." Shen Tianzhan nodded. He saw Shen Jun turn around and found his choice to have been sensible back then. He thought that maybe he did not need to state his terms to Yi Futian. Being able to stay at the side of excellent people was the best condition one could have been offered. The man whom the imperial advisor of Dali had been willing to spare at the cost of his career was showing through his feats that he was meant to be legendary. Yu Sheng's name became known throughout the Battle of the Crimson River, and he was then ranked in the regional king ranking. While Yi Futian did not have a stage like Yu Sheng to show what he was capable of, he was walking his own path and achieving greatness. The brothers, together with Xia Qingyuan and the others around him, would have become frightening figures in the future. There was one thing that shocked Shen Tianzhan more than anything else. It was the fact that Yi Futian was the absolute center of the group. It was as if all excellent people gathered because of him. The eldest student of the imperial advisor of Dali, Yin Yuan, who had made a breakthrough into holiness of Nirvana Plane, joined Qinya City's ranks not long ago. He was training in seclusion in Qinya Academy. Shen Tianzhan found that he might be witnessing the rise of a legend. Two figures were training at yet another training ground in the City Lord's office. One of them was basking in boundless flames and becoming tall and imposing as if he was a god of war of flames, clad all over in terrifying flames of the way. 4 layers and no more still, the figure said. He was none other than Yi Futian. After things at Qinya City quieted down, he had been looking into and training in the way of Emperor Qua's lineage ever since he had awakened. He had been spending his days training quietly and stabilizing his plane. He had been at proving holiness level back in the battle before. His plane had become unusually stable, and his aura thick and solid, looking far more brilliant and refined than before. Training at Saint Plane was not something that could be rushed. The Chonglu battle form has 13 layers to it, and every single plane in sainthood had 3 layers. Now that you can reach the 4th layer, it is already something that could only be done at Saint of True Self level. The one standing opposite him elaborated. It was none other than Wu Yong, the Wu clan leader. Yi Futian imparted the ways of Emperor Qua's lineage to him as well, and they were both researching the ways together. He was there to guide Yi Futian in training many times, but Yi Futian was able to tap into the will of Emperor Kua's lineage to help Wu Yong train as well. Both men were helping each other to reach greater heights. Xiao Qingyuan told him how to deal with those who switched sides as soon as she returned. He did not even return to Emperor Kua's city in the western region, and had told the three holiness of nirvanas in that city to take care of things. He did not want to concern himself with affairs on that side. Those who had followed him back then were all staying in Qinya City with him. Wu Yong knew clearly that Yi Futian intended to make him the number one figure among the 9 tribes, helping him rule the 9 tribes that Emperor Kua left behind in the past. As such, his only duty at the moment was to train with Yi Futian and enhance his powers. In the world of cultivators, one's own power served as the basis of everything. If his powers were to be unable to reach the top and become the strongest among the 9 tribes, others would not have listened to him, even if Yi Futian wanted to make him the leader, as his seat would have been built on sand instead. Well, you have experienced what it was like at the 12th layer in the past, senior. Yi Futian smiled and said. He lent his powers to Wu Yong back then, and Wu Yong had been creating the battle form at the 12th layer by tapping into the will of Emperor Kua. That was already at the pinnacle of holiness of Nirvana plane. It would be the level of Ren Huang at the 13th layer. I couldn't have possibly done it all on my own. Wu Yong smiled and added, by the way, there is no need to keep addressing me as your senior, City Lord Yi. It will suffice just to call me by name. The habit stuck. Yi Futian chuckled nonchalantly and continued. Keep looking into the way of Emperor Kua's lineage, and I believe you'll be able to do it all on your own before long. You might even be able to go further than that. I'd do my best, Wu Yong said. Continue to train, senior. I shall train in isolation for some time, Yi Futian said. Wu Yong nodded, excused himself and left. Yi Futian was training in isolation. Everyone else in the City Lord's office was also working hard to enhance their plane. Crimson Dragon City was the absolute center of Crimson Dragon Realm. That city was known as the #1 city in all of Crimson Dragon Realm. There was a divine mountain at Crimson Dragon City, the Crimson Mountain. The mountain was a long and winding one, making it seem like a dragon. There were castles on that dragon of a mountain, covering the entire mountain itself. The castles extended from the foot right to the top, which made it seem like they were connected to the sun in the sky. There were countless standing at the foot of the divine mountain every day, gazing upon the incredibly divine palaces and castles above. That place was the royal palace of Crimson Dragon Realm, where the Crimson Dragon Emperor resided. Outside of the royal palace, a river was found at the foot of the mountain, which was named Gonyuan. The river water was always boiling. It was as if the sun had been sunken in it. The Crimson Dragon army stood guard at the side of Gonyuan, looking majestic and holy. A long cry was heard from the top of the mountain. Countless below looked up and saw an incredibly divine scene before them. Golden ravens were seen pulling the sun carriage out on a journey. It seemed as if a divine priest sat on the carriage. They were not the only golden ravens seen. There were many of those divine birds, and they were all pulling sun carriages themselves. The divine priest rode on the carriages and flew past the crowd below, heading elsewhere. What is happening? The stunning scene before the people of Crimson Dragon City shook their minds. They were wondering if something huge was about to happen. While Crimson Dragon Emperor was known as the absolute master of Crimson Emperor Realm, he did not interfere with the affairs of the realm itself. The Crimson Dragon Realm was vast, and it was also the main realm of the Crimson Dragon region. If he were to get himself involved in everything going on, he would have worked himself to death. As such, regardless of the severity of what was happening in Crimson Dragon Realm, so long as such happenings would not tear Crimson Dragon Realm apart, the Emperor would not get involved. The carriages before the people were naturally not those of the Emperor. However, many wondered how many wielded power great enough to call for such a majestic entourage. The golden raves were the ones pulling the carriages, and divine priests were mobilized. Countless looked at the carriages far away in different directions. They seemed to have seen golden sun petals on the carriages, which were scattered everywhere as they went. Those were golden peach flowers. It is His Highness. Everyone knew who the one who sent the carriages at that moment was. With the messengers sent out like that by His Highness, it meant one thing. Crimson Dragon Realm was all in an uproar. Countless people flashed and headed towards the carriages, wanting to know who received the peach invitations from His Highness. At the turf of one of the topmost forts found in Crimson Dragon City, the sun carriages were seen heading inside from above before long. The divine priest from the carriage looked at the people below and waved, saying, "An invitation from His Highness." A young man who looked dashing and legendary stood at a tower. He extended his hand, and an invitation was handed over to him. He looked at the golden peach flower carved on it. The same thing was happening in many places in Crimson Dragon City. Several sun carriages arrived above the Crimson River at that time. They drove into the river at the same time, heading towards the regional palace, which was at the center of the river. No one stopped them. There were also sun carriages outside of Crimson Dragon City as well, causing a huge commotion. Those carriages were all heading in different directions. The divine birds pulled the sun carriages and arrived above Qinya City before long. Countless looked up, and a piece of shocking news was heard, causing their heart to race. They all rushed to where the city lord's office was. As expected, the sun carriages were seen stopping above the city lord's office. The divine priest waved and said, "An invitation from His Highness. The recipient shall be Yi Futian, city lord of Qinya City." One figure after another flashed in the city lord's office. All of them looked up, and they shuddered deep down. Yi Futian emerged as well. The golden peach invitation hovered down and landed on his palm. An invitation from His Highness. In Crimson Dragon Realm, such a grand entourage, and from one known to be His Highness, could only be from the royal palace in Crimson Dragon City. So that battle had caught the royal palace's attention? With that, he was one step closer to his goal. There were also golden raves pulling the sun carriages at some distant places. When Yi Futian received the invitation, they headed to the eastern region and entered Emperor Dong's palace, handing over a peach invitation to the prince of the place, Duan Wuji. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Attend the peach banquet with the peach invitation in hand, and everyone under the heavens shall know of your name. Attend the peach banquet with the peach invitation in hand, and everyone under the heavens shall know of your name. That was a tradition held for many years in Crimson Dragon Realm. The flaming peach at the divine mountain of Crimson Dragon City blossomed once every several years. When the peach flowers filled the mountain, the princes of the Crimson Dragon Realm would have ventured out to hand the invitations. The number of people who were able to get their hands on the peach invitation was 1 in 100 million. There were only a handful of people attending the event each time. Every single person who would have received the peach invitation were legendary figures in the realm. As such, the importance of the peach invitation was second only to the regional king ranking. This explained why the saying, "Attend the peach banquet with the peach invitation in hand, and everyone under the heavens shall know of your name," was associated with the event. Even if one was little more than a nameless face, getting the peach invitation guaranteed that they would be on their way to being renowned throughout the realm. Everyone in Crimson Dragon Realm would know of their name. The event at that time was not an exception as well. The phenomenon of the divine priests descending the mountain and delivering the peach invitation was a sight to behold. Countless paid close attention to them, as well as those who would receive the peach invitations from the divine priests, riding on the sun carriages. Those names were gradually known by all when the invitations were delivered. Some were expected to receive the peach invitations. For instance, Luo Yang of the Luo clan was someone ranked on the regional king ranking, as well as a figure of unparalleled powers among his peers. There was also the virgin of the Yu clan, Yu Shifei, who was a peerless woman known throughout Crimson Dragon City. Many thought her future was obvious. Many were surprised that Yi Futian was able to receive a peach invitation. But then again, it was entirely within reason. Although Yi Futian had to indeed prove his mettle through his powers, he had tapped into the lineage of Emperor Kwa in the battle at Qinya City, and borrowed the flames in the ruins of the late emperor. He had yet to indeed prove his worth, by fighting the most terrifying of figures armed solely with his powers. But then again, his shining record in the battlefield thus far said that he did not lack such abilities. No one doubted how extraordinary Yi Futian was. All he needed to truly shine was a grand battle. As such, it was deemed entirely within reason that he had received a peach invitation. Two people had received the peach invitation in Qianya City: Yu Sheng, who was training in the regional palace, and the city lord Yi Futian. The future of Qianya City would, without doubt, be glorious. Other than that, the regional palace attracted the attention of many, as it was the only place capable of receiving multiple invitations. The delivery of the invitations caught the attention of Crimson Dragon City in an instant. Everyone was waiting quietly. The peach banquet was thrown on that day. A bridge appeared above Ganyuan outside of the royal palace. It was a bridge permitting entry into the royal palace. Another path was opened up outside of the royal palace, granting access to the western side of the Divine Mountain. Countless people arrived outside of the royal palace and went through the bridge, stepping into the mountain to witness the event. Peach flowers blossomed throughout the western side of the mountain. Golden flaming peach flowers were dazzling and glittered brilliantly under the sun, making them look even more glorious as their scent permeated the place. The people walked along the path and finally stopped somewhere far away, gazing at the extraordinarily beautiful, heaven-like forests of peach trees before them. There were pavilions among the blossoming flaming peach flowers, and there was a raging waterfall falling gloriously behind. Golden ravens circled above the waterfall, and a dazzling rainbow appeared when the rays of the sun shone above, making the scenery very dreamlike. There were also pavilions above the waterfall. Carriages were flying above the crowd at that moment. They looked up and saw one figure after another streaking through the air. Those who had peach invitations in their hands were permitted to fly directly into the royal palace. As such, it was evident that those were the people who received the peach invitations. There was a woman at the center, streaking through the air. She looked supremely dashing while extremely elegant as well. "Yin Tianjiao, of the regional palace," some below said as they recognized her. The woman was Princess Yin Tianjiao, daughter of Emperor Wu. Her combat prowess was extraordinary, but both she and Duan Wuji of Emperor Dong's palace had lost to Yi Futian on the trip to Emperor Kua's ruins. Yi Futian was the one who had been able to acquire the lineage. However, both of them were still able to receive the peach invitation. It was a recognition for them both. "Is that Yu Sheng?" Someone looked elsewhere at a stout young man. Many nodded and replied, "That's him. Xing Kai is here too, and he brought Xing Qiu with him." Someone noticed both Xing Kai and Xing Qiu were arriving together from another direction. Those who received the peach invitations were allowed to bring someone to attend the event. As such, the Xing Qiu's appearance was hardly surprising to the crowd. However, Xing Qiu had almost ended up killed by Yu Sheng in the Battle of Qianya City. Everyone was curious about Xing Kai's intentions in bringing his brother along. There was a group in the air that landed in different places after they arrived. They were all from the regional palace, but they did not seem to be any familiar faces among them. There was another group of mighty ones coming through the air. The auras emanated from them were all powerful, and the central figure exuded extraordinary bearing. That figure was none other than Prince Duan Wuji from Emperor Dong's palace, which was located in the eastern region of Crimson Dragon Realm. "Yi Futian is here too." A group of mighty ones from Qianya City streaked through the air from another direction. The leading figure was none other than Yi Futian. Xiaqing Yuan was by his side. They descended directly in the peach forest, and Yu Sheng came to them after they landed. Yi Futian looked around him and found several familiar faces. There were Yin Tianjiao and Duan Wuji, both of whom he had fought before. Other than that, there were also Xing Kai and Xing Qiu, whom they naturally knew. There was another group arriving, and they were all from the regional palace. Every one of them looked superb. There were two among them who were especially so. One was a young man who looked to be in his 30s and dressed in white. Countless pairs of eyes were glued onto him, and mumbles were heard. It was obvious that they knew of that person's identity. He was a cultivator from the regional palace, Pei Min. He too was a figure ranked in the regional king ranking. He He was not a native resident of Crimson Dragon Realm, but one who came from another imperial realm, and from a place called the Sword Emperor Palace. He had traveled far and wide before coming to the primary realm of the Crimson Dragon region, and he was doing it to further his training, as he wanted to see the #1 holy land of cultivation in Crimson Dragon Realm for himself. There was yet another extremely beautiful woman in another direction. She was daughter of a Run Huang whose appearance was on par with that of Im Tianjiao. It was said that 3 women received the peach invitations, and all of them looked stunning. But of course their overall powers were quite a distance away from the men who had received the peach invitation. Futian quietly eyed those around him as soon as he arrived. He knew that all who came were considered the most extraordinary of their generation, and many were descendants of Ren Huang. Luo Yang of the Luo clan was there as well. He caught a lot of attention, and was extremely renowned in Crimson Dragon City, due to being ranked on the regional king ranking. Furthermore, he had been a legendary genius who had refused the offer to train in the regional palace, which served as a testament to the extent of his arrogance. The Luo clan was a family descended from a Ren Huang. While there had not been a Ren Huang among them now, the lineage left behind by their ancestors was extremely powerful. Yu Shifei. Countless people looked up at that moment. A soothing sensation was felt under the scorching sun, cooling the hearts of many, and making all feel extremely comfortable. A group of mighty ones descended from above, and the leading figure was dressed in an aqua blue dress, looking clean and elegant. She was none other than Yu Shifei, a woman extremely renowned throughout Crimson Dragon City. Shifei, a figure was seen above at that moment. Many vaguely saw the dazzling ray of the sun descending. Someone was basking in holy light, and a figure appeared at the pavilion above the waterfall. His jet-black long hair draped on his shoulders while his eyes looked sharp. His handsome look seemed to be able to mesmerize people with just a smile, making all who happened to gaze upon him be amazed by how dashing he was. That was Qi Shang, a prince of Crimson Dragon Realm. He extended his hand and smiled when he descended. His eyes were on Yu Shifei all the while. Yu Shifei smiled faintly as well, which looked brilliant. She then took to the air, and came to Qi Shang's side. She let him hold her hand. Both of them gradually hovered down, and the golden peach flowers danced in the air. The scene was nothing short of mesmerizing. What a couple! Yi Futian praised deep down. Qi Shang and Yu Shifei were indeed a couple that was very pleasing to the eye. It was as if they were a match made in heaven. Countless below looked up at the peach forest above and smiled, sending their blessings and regards. But then again, there was no one capable of tearing the couple apart, regardless of if they were blessed by those around them or not. The son of Crimson Dragon Emperor and a virgin of the Yu clan liked each other, and there could not have been a better match for either of them. It was only a matter of time before Yu Shifei became a queen of Crimson Dragon Realm. If Qi Shang were to inherit the throne in the future, then she would have been the wife of the Emperor of Crimson Dragon Realm. Qi Shang and Yu Shifei descended before a pavilion, and a Guqin appeared before them. Both of them sat cross-legged, and looked at each other, before putting their fingers on the strings, and began playing. Beautiful tunes danced, and the illustrated scene was stunning. It was as if they were able to sense what the other was thinking. No one bothered them, and everyone listened quietly. Despite Qi Shang's supreme talents, many wondered if he would be a prince who would forsake the throne for a woman. Yi Futian listened to the tune quietly, and it seemed that the tune tugged at his heartstrings. There seemed to be a tinge of sorrow within the warmth. He looked up in the sky and saw a vague figure appearing, lingering in his mind. Xiaqing Yuan, who was listening to the tune beside Yi Futian, noticed his peculiarity. She turned her eyes to look at him. She seemed to be able to see the faint sorrow and dejection on his face. He must have missed her. She lowered her head somewhat before turning to look at Qi Shang and Yu Shifei again. Her eyes glimmered with a hint of envy. The peach flowers continued to dance in the air. Xiaqing Yuan extended her hand, and a petal landed on her palm. She wondered if her feelings would remain unrequited. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The sound of the tune was beautiful, and it was even more so when the tune was played by them both. The sound of the tune was beautiful, and it was even more so when the tune was played by them both. Golden peach flowers dropped around both of them. Many saw Qi Shang and Yu Shifei smile at each other. All who witnessed that moment were able to tell how beautiful the relationship between them was. There were 18 candidates ranked on the regional king ranking in Crimson Dragon Realm, and there were 8 who were proving holiness and saints of true self. All of them were at the event. That fact alone served as a testament to the importance of the Peach Invitation. Both Qi Shang and Yu Shifei were 2 of those people. Yu Shifei stood out even more, given that she was the only woman among those 8 mentioned. The other 2 women were Princess Yin Tianjiao, daughter of Emperor Wu, who was training in the regional palace, and Xu Zi, daughter of Emperor Xu. Both of them were formidable cultivators in their own right, yet they were not ranked in the regional king ranking. It was easily seen from that fact alone just how exceptional the virgin from the Yu clan was. Her clan was currently placing all of their hope on her. Yu Shifei was the key to the future of her clan. Many were wondering just how wonderful it would be if both Qi Shang and Yu Shifei both made it into Renhuang Plain. They would probably end up like the current Crimson Dragon Emperor and his queen. Xia Qingyuan looked at the peach flower that landed on her palm and asked, "Were you two been this beautiful at one time?" Yi Futian turned his gaze away from the sky to look at Xia Qingyuan at his side. He smiled beamingly and nodded, saying, "Probably more beautiful than this. It probably won't take long for you to fulfill your wish on this trip to Crimson Dragon Realm," Xia Qingyuan said in a low voice. "That would be great." Yi Futian nodded. The beautiful tune gradually stopped. Qi Shang and Yu Shifei smiled at each other before turning around to look at the crowd. Qi Shang's eyes turned to Yi Futian. It was the first time the prince saw him. Yi Futian had handsome looks yet sported silver hair. The prince wondered what he had been through. "I heard that you're good at playing the guqin, City Lord Yi," Qi Shang smiled and quipped. It was evident that he heard the conversation between him and Xia Qingyuan, despite them having kept their volume down. Qi Shang thought that the princess of Emperor Xia's realm was with Yi Futian, yet he seemed to be able to tell that he was probably wrong from that simple conversation he heard. "I know a thing or two, Your Highness," Yi Futian nodded and said. "Well, we're in such a beautiful place. How about you play a tune for us?" Qi Shang smiled and asked. "Sure." Yi Futian nodded. While Qi Shang was indeed a prince of Crimson Dragon Realm, and the favorite prince of the emperor, he lacked any overbearing pressure. On the contrary, he seemed to be like one of those dashing gentlemen who loved flirting around. Yi Futian sat on the ground, and a guqin materialized before him. His entire being seemed to have gotten into the zone, and his aura changed completely. He felt as if he was in a quiet, tranquil place, isolated from the world. An illustration seemed to have been painted as soon as the sound of his tune was heard. Qi Shang and Yu Shifei were both adept at guqin. But then again, they could not have portrayed the scenery painted by the music itself, even if they knew little about music in the first place. "This is beautiful," Yu Shifei commented faintly. The tune sounded rather similar to the one they played before. It was as if the tune itself was an embodiment of the concept of beauty itself. What differed was that the beauty in the tune between both of them was that of resonance. The beauty in the tune played by Yi Futian seemed to have stemmed more from remembrance. Everyone turned to look at Yi Futian. He was the most renowned figure in the realm as of late. He finally stood alongside the cutting edge of geniuses in Crimson Dragon Realm. There seemed to be a battle fought below the mountain. Qi Shang was hardly surprised. He looked at the ground below and saw an ancient path with a figure running on it. That figure seemed to have been blazing a trail and intended to reach the mountain, joining the peach banquet. That was also the rule of the peach banquet. Those who lacked the peach invitation were welcome to fight their way up there. And then, there was indeed one who took to fighting their way up. Many turned to look at the trail leading to the peach banquet below. Someone was seen moving forward, emanating an overwhelming aura, as they blitzed the trail before them. There was a group of cultivators following behind. Someone from Xiang City. Someone was able to tell who was coming. Xiang Nan, a prince of Emperor Xiang's realm, was actually among them. However, the one who fought was not Xiang Nan, as they had yet to make it into St. Plain, and as such, were not included in the list of invitees. But then again, that person resembled Xiang Nan somewhat. That person was nonetheless Xiang Nan's elder brother. His name was Xiang Zhe, and he was another prince from Emperor Xiang's realm. The tune continued to be played, and a rumble was heard as Xiang Zhe fought as he moved. He managed to beat all who stood in his way. Defeated combatants were found all over the trail. Xiang Zhe walked up and came to the place below the peach banquet. He then cupped his hands and said to Qi Shang, "I'm Xiang Zhe of Emperor Xiang's realm. I have long known of the renown of the peach banquet of Crimson Dragon realm. Please pardon my intrusion, Your Highness." The peach banquet was known as the #1 banquet in all of Crimson Dragon realm. "Never mind, please," Qi Shang then said. Xiang Zhe nodded and stepped up, heading into the peach banquet officially. A wave of aura swept all over the place when he walked. It was as if there was a formless force trying to break up the tune. The peach flowers were shredded and lashed out at Yi Futian as a formless force. Xia Qingyuan took a look in his direction. She stepped out, and holy light burst from her body. Sword wills filled her surroundings, and she drew a line with her arm. The peach flowers around her danced in the air, looking very beautiful. She pointed her finger at Xiang Zhe's direction, causing the dancing flowers to streak out like swords of calamity, devouring everything in their path. Xiang Zhe did not retreat, but took another step forward. Formless waves of aura clashed with the sword wills of the peach flowers. A formless storm was formed, and the flowers were strewn the ground. Yi Futian continued to play the strings lightly. Xia Qingyuan seemed to have danced with the peach flowers. The scene was so extraordinarily beautiful, just like how it had been when Qi Shang and Yu Shifei played together. Eventually, the dancing notes gradually stopped, and the music was no longer heard. Yi Futian did not look at Xiang Zhe. He looked at Qi Shang and smiled, saying, "Sorry about that." "Marvelous," Qi Shang smiled and said. Xia Qingyuan and Qi Shang both dispelled their auras, and both stood there quietly. Xia Qingyuan returned to Yi Futian's side as if nothing had happened. However, everyone was able to clearly sense the intense conflict between the two parties in those brief moments. Xiang Zhe probably had not been in Crimson Dragon realm for long. Everyone naturally knew about the feud between Xiang City and Qinya City. Xiang Zhe stepped into the peach banquet with overwhelming force, with a feint of provoking Yi Futian. However, Yi Futian did not even bother responding to the prince, so much so that he did not even bother looking at the intruder. An extremely cocky one indeed. Many found such a peach banquet to be even more exciting. The expression of all the people around remained normal. Every single one who attended the banquet was a figure of legends, after all. Qi Shang turned his eyes to look at the crowd around him, before smiling and saying, "All who received the peach invitation are all the most extraordinary of people to be found in Crimson Dragon realm. Now that you are all here, it is indeed a good chance for all to witness just how extraordinary, the most formidable of cultivators, are in Crimson Dragon realm." Everyone knew that Qi Shang was only telling the truth. The peach banquet was lauded as the #1 banquet in all of Crimson Dragon realm. All who were invited were practically the most extraordinary of people found in Crimson Dragon realm. All beings of the first 2 levels of St. Plain, who were also people ranked on the regional king ranking, were all present. The others were also people with the potential of being ranked in said ranking as well. Even the entourages that came with those figures were also considered renowned people in Crimson Dragon realm. For instance, Princess Xia Qingyuan of Emperor Xia's realm was among Yi Futian's entourage. Xing Qiu came alongside Xing Kai as well as the personal students of the Saint King of Gai. Other than that, there were also several from the regional palace being invited. Other than those who were invited, there were also many renowned people from the regional palace present. One figure after another appeared in the surrounding areas of the peach banquet. Many of them sported extremely powerful auras, and their powers were unpredictable. They were all standing at faraway corners of the mountain, keeping an eye on the event. All of those people were the topmost ones from the royal palace of Crimson Dragon realm. Many among them would become legendary figures themselves if they were to venture out on their own. City Lord Yi played a tune right after Shifei, and I played one. We were only doing it for fun, of course, but I'm sure many of you have heard of the story of a magic zither showing up at Crimson Dragon Realm many years ago. Many years have passed since, yet there are still none in the royal palace capable of playing the instrument. The guqin appeared in the past several peach banquets, and there were still none capable of playing it. Qi Shang looked at the crowd and elaborated. Many who had attended past banquets nodded in secret. Countless had heard of the magic zither's rumors in Crimson Dragon City. It was a very famous instrument. It was said that the magic zither came from a demonic emperor and was imbued with the will of the demonic emperor. Many saints were not even able to get near the instrument, let alone play it. It will work the same today as well. Anyone capable of connecting and playing the instrument will be allowed to take it away right away. Qi Shang smiled and said. The royal palace prepared several treasures for every peach banquet. Every single piece was undoubtedly an imperial-level item. Anyone capable of wielding it would be welcome to take them away. Furthermore, things were different from those treasures acquired at the ruins of Emperor Qua. Those items were things gifted by the royal palace of Crimson Dragon Emperor at the peach banquet. No one would have dared to take them by force afterward. There was also no need to worry about them being reclaimed. They were welcome to be taken away with no strings attached. However, the magic zither had been around for several peach banquets. Despite being the first piece to show in the banquet, its difficulty would probably eclipse all others for historical reasons. Many deemed that it remained impossible for anyone to take the instrument away. There was simply no way of taking away a magic zither that no one in the royal palace was capable of playing. Please. Qi Shang lifted his head and said. Terrifying aura emanated from yet another corner of the mountain. The weather changed, and the place turned dark soon after. A dark object was seen flying from the sky far away. A holiness of nirvana appeared in the air. He moved his hands, and a dark item dropped from the sky. Raging waves washed all over the place. Peach flowers danced in the air before wilting at breakneck speeds, turning into black flowers. Boom! The magic zither descended and hovered in the middle of the banquet. Terrifying demonic aura formed around it, as if demonic notes danced, and formless vibrations emanated from it in an extremely overwhelming manner. One formidable will after another was cast, heading straight for the magic zither. Futian was also doing the same, infiltrating the instrument with his spiritual powers. However, his spiritual will was soon caught in the terrifying whirlpool. As soon as it infiltrated the instrument, terrifying notes washed out shockingly, crushing every will that had gotten near the instrument. A Runhuang-level piece. Futian gazed onto the magic zither, finding the demonic will within to definitely be that of Runhuang level. It was a guqin that a demonic emperor had once used. This sure as hell is an event hosted by the royal palace of Crimson Dragon Realm, alright. The peach banquet really spared no expense. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The magic zither, which was hovering in midair, seemed to have terrifying music notes dancing around it. The mighty ones of Crimson Dragon City all knew that the guqin was still actually in its dormant state. Anyone who dared to pluck the strings on the magic zither would invoke demonic will power that was even more terrifying, bursting with the notes at frightening force. The magic zither, which was hovering in midair, seemed to have terrifying music notes dancing around it. The mighty ones of Crimson Dragon City all knew that the guqin was still actually in its dormant state. Anyone who dared to pluck the strings on the magic zither would invoke demonic will power that was even more terrifying, bursting with the notes at frightening force. While there have been legendary figures in past peach banquets, none were able to withstand the pulses of the notes for long. As such, there was still no one capable of mastering and playing that magic zither. Who would like to have a go first? Qi Shang looked at the crowd and asked. Other than the ones who had gotten their hands on the peach invitations, the ones who came with them were also welcome to try. But then again, those who were tagging along were destined to remain at the sidelines. The ones who received the invitations were the most brilliant there were to be found. Go up and take a shot, Xing Kai said to Xing Qiu, who was by his side. He knew a thing or two about the magic zither, and knew that the instrument was a test for Xingqiu. All right. Xingqiu nodded and moved, coming before the magic zither. Countless eyes were onto him in mere moments, including many leading figures of the royal palace on the mountain and faraway corners. They all locked their eyes on Xingqiu. Xingqiu was lauded as yet another Xingkai before the Battle of the Crimson River. He had supreme talent, and would become a member of the regional palace. However, he met Yu Sheng at that battle. Since then Xingqiu, who had once been placed with high hopes, felt as if an insurmountable ravine was right before him at all times. Many even wondered if Xingqiu were to meet Yu Sheng before the Battle of the Crimson River, he might not even have been able to break into Saint Plain. Yu Sheng would have made him doubt himself. Regardless, Xingqiu was a competent person nonetheless. Many wondered how far he would be able to go. The light of the great path shimmered above his body, resonating with the world around him. He seemed to have basked in holy light. The glittering rings of light melded with the great path of his surroundings. He then stepped out and walked towards the magic zither. Demonic will rushed at him from within the magic zither. At that moment, Xingqiu felt a vast demonic might had surrounded him. Everything in the world seemed to have changed. There were no longer peach flowers to be found on the mountain. He was in the world of the demon. There was a face appearing right before him. Yet it was not the face of the demon lord. That was the face of Yu Sheng. That demon seemed to have been something stemming from his heart. Crack. Xingqiu clenched his fists tight, and continued to move with a rumble, heading towards the magic zither. The instrument seemed to have become huge. The 7 strings of the guqin, which were hovering midair, looked unervingly clear within the demon island space. His arm glittered all over, and rings of light circled about him. He extended his arm when he was at the strings. The strings vibrated immediately after he plucked them with his fingers. Extremely formidable demonic might washed all over the place instantly, roaring at the image as it moved. Xingqiu seemed to have beheld Yu Sheng, who had taken the form of an overlord demon king, then threw a fist at him. Its raging demonic might was difficult to defend against. A tinge of coldness was seen in his eyes. He then shouted and stepped out again, keeping his body centered. He then plucked the 2nd string again with his finger. Boom! An even greater, wilder force swept out. Xingqiu's body was sent flying. He rose and kept his eyes forward. That magic zither continued to hover in midair as if nothing happened. It was as if everything that he had been through mere moments ago had been a dream. Twice then, many sported solemn looks. Even someone as strong as Xingqiu had been sent flying, with only having plucked 2 strings. The magic zither was more like an instrument best used for testing the strength of one's will instead of one being played. If the goal was to use it to play a tune, no one around was deemed powerful enough to do so. Xingkai looked disappointed when he saw what happened. He knew a little about the past peach banquets somehow, and there was no way the likes of Xingqiu would have gotten further than that. However, the instrument was capable of attacking the will of its player. If the player had a wavering will, they would have suffered worse under the instrument's effects, making one think the attacks were stronger than they were, and were very difficult to resist. It seemed that Yu Sheng had a profound effect on Xingqiu, as he had become a solid obstacle in Xingqiu's path to cultivation. Get up there, Xingkai then said to someone beside him, Gai Huang's personal student Hua Yi. Hua Yi nodded and walked out, coming before the magic zither. Xingqiu turned his eyes to Hua Yi, who became clad in the dazzling will of the great path of space, tearing apart the demonic will power rushing at him. He slowly moved towards the instrument, coming right before the guqin that was hovering in midair. He then pointed at the air, and seemed to have grabbed hold of the string on the magic zither, remotely before plucking it. The sound of the guqin reverberated in an instant. However, it did not sound pleasing at all. The sound heard was that of a howl, sending rumbles throughout the space. Golden storm of space whipped up around Hua Yi, tearing everything apart. He pointed with yet another finger, plucking the string yet again. A demonic aura, that was even more raging, swept through the place. Boundless notes danced as if there was a ferocious demon intruding. Hua Yi stepped out again with his outstretched finger plucking the 3rd string. Hua Yi felt as if his spiritual will was being devoured. Yet he did not let up. His finger stirred again, causing the fourth note to be heard. His body was sent flying as he grunted. His steps were faltering, and he skid quite a bit on the ground before stopping, looking rather disheveled. Huayi was doing much better compared to Xingqiu. Both of them returned. Xingqiu lowered his head somehow. He knew what his brother was doing. Xing Kai was deliberately getting Huayi to stir him up. I reminded you last when you fought in the Battle of the Crimson River. If you're unable to overcome that obstacle of yours on your own, you probably won't be able to move even a step further in your training. You won't even get to the level of true self, let alone Renhuang Plain. Xing Kai said to Xingqiu. Talent was not the only thing that mattered in cultivation, after all. Mighty ones from all sides tried their hands one after another afterward, with the strongest of them being only able to pluck the strings 5 times before giving in to the pressure. However, those who had received the peach invitation had yet to make their move. Yin Tianjia was the first among those who received the invitation to try it out. She managed to pluck the strings on the magic zither 6 times, breaking the limit seen before, earning her praises from all sides. Those who received the invitations were indeed different. Xu Zi, daughter of Emperor Xu, basked in an extremely dazzling purple glow of lightning when she stepped out, looking overbearing as she resisted the pressure. The place howled. Devastating aura formed around her. However, she was only able to pluck 6 strings as well. Duan Wuji of Emperor Dong's palace made his move, and he was only able to pluck 6 strings. Xiang Zhe of Emperor Xiang's realm made his move after that. The man who had been fighting his way up to the peach banquet dazzled all over when he moved. However, like those before him, he too was only able to pluck 6 strings, earning him the praise of many. It seemed to them that Xiang Zhe was also someone who was of superb talent. He shot a glance at Yi Futian after he was thrown back, looking rather spiteful and provocative. No one from Yi Futian's group made a move. Yu Xing shot a glance at Xiang Zhe. His eyes were overbearing as he stepped forward. He knew little of the way of the Guqin, but if it was only about plucking the strings, he thought he would be able to do the same, given how others before him managed to do so. Boom! Demonic might rolled as he stepped out. Every single step he took caused the ground to shake. His eyes were terrifying. It was as if they had become those of demons. He was affected when he had gotten near the magic zither, entering a mystical demonic space. It was as if many great demons were charging at him. However, as someone who trained in demonic ways, a shadow of a supreme demon seemed to have manifested on him as he stepped out in overwhelming force. He came before the instrument and played. Demonic might rolled, and howls were heard. He continued to pluck the 2nd string, as if he felt nothing. Demonic auras roared and howled. His eyes were cold. He then plucked the 3rd and the 4th strings, not flinching even a bit. The 5th string rumbled, and the place was filled with raging roars of the demons. Terrifying waves swept all over the place. Yu Sheng stood tall like a mountain and plucked the 6th string. He felt an irresistible demonic willpower bombarding him afterward, causing his brain to rattle. However indomitable, overbearing will seem to appear in those eyes of his. The wind howled, and the peach flowers all over him wilted quickly. A terrifying demonic storm appeared around Yu Sheng. Clang! The 7th string rattled. There seemed to be a supreme demonic shadow appearing on the magic zither. Yu Sheng shouted and looked it in the eye, remaining unflinching as he did so. However, his body was nonetheless thrown back afterward, rolling on the ground as rumbles were heard. His body continued to sustain the striking force as skid marks marked the ground. Some power indeed. Many shuddered. Yu Sheng was the first to have plucked all 7 strings. However, he remained utterly incapable of genuinely mastering and playing the instrument. Mighty ones ranked on the regional king ranking were indeed a cut above the others. There is no way anyone could master the magic zither just by plucking the strings alone. A voice was heard at that moment. Everyone turned around and saw yet another, who was ranked on the regional king ranking. Xie Qingshan, a prince from an imperial realm, a descendant of Emperor Xie. Xie Qingshan looked dashing. He had a lithe figure and looked supreme. He said, "That has been the case with the peach banquets in the past. 7 courts have always been the limit. The end was the same, even after that. How could the will of the saintly path resist the will of a demonic emperor? Yi Futian nodded deep down, agreeing with what Xie Qingshan said. If one were to pluck the strings, there was no way one could be able to master the magic zither. Since it was a guqin, mastering it probably required resonance in the way of the guqin. However, it was apparently not easy to be acknowledged by the magic zither. Qi Shang was a good player of the guqin, yet there was no one in the royal palace capable of accomplishing the feat. It was obvious that he was one of those people. No matter, Brother Xia, limits are meant to be broken. There has indeed been no one capable of accomplishing the feat in the past. Yet that is not to say that there won't be anyone capable of doing it in the future. Although it is known that mastering it is impossible, one can still try, someone said at the side. The one who spoke was Pei Min, who hailed from the Sword Emperor Palace from another imperial realm, and he was currently training in the regional king palace. He was also Xie Qingshan's elder brother in training. You're correct, brother. I'd like to see if you have the chance of breaking the limit of 7. Xie Qingshan then smiled and said, Sure. Regardless if I succeed or not, there is indeed no harm in trying. Pei Min smiled nonchalantly and stepped out. Sword wills filled the air as he moved, shrouding his surroundings. The Sword Emperor Palace was known as the #1 holy land of the sword in all of Crimson Dragon Realm. It was where Emperor Jian, the Sword Emperor, resided. Pei Min hailed from the Sword Emperor Palace, and was currently training in the Regional King Palace. He was also a figure who was on par with Xing Kai. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Pei Min walked up to the magic zither, surrounded by towering sword wills as he moved. Pei Min walked up to the magic zither, surrounded by towering sword wills as he moved. Sword aura and demonic might clashed within an instant. He extended his hand and sword will howled. Something was then dropped onto Pei Min's hand, a terrifying sword conjured from the sword will. His palm shook, and he pointed his finger. The sword tore through space and broke through the terrifying demonic aura currents, heading straight for the instrument. He did not try to pluck the strings. He tried to stab the instrument with the sword instead. Clang! The sword landed onto the string, and it surprisingly held. Notes that carried terrifying demonic aura rolled about in the space. Rushing at Pei Min stepped forward and tore through the space. Sword wills once again coalesced right before him. He flicked his wrist, and yet another sword streaked through midair. That blade was sharper than the one before, bringing about a sonic boom as it moved. The blade hit on second string and rang. Both the sword and string vibrated. There were then 2 swords on the strings. The strings continued to vibrate, and terrifying demonic power gushed out howling. The swords on them continued to shake and ring, yet the towering sword will continued to rain down and meld with the swords, enabling them to stick on the strings without breaking off. The 3rd sword was fired. It was then followed by the 4th and the 5th. Every single blade was stronger than the one fired previously, getting increasingly powerful. The space seemed to have been drowned by demonic aura, and Pei Min seemed to be trapped within. However, he remained standing like an unbreakable sword. Terrifying demonic shadows appeared and howled, corrupting the swords and making them pitch black. However, Pei Min continued to shoot the 6th sword, which stuck to the string without flinching. Towering notes continued to dance, and the 6th sword stuck on the strings shook with even greater force. Pei Min's aura was incredibly strong, and he then fired the 7th sword. A dragon of the sword seemed to have appeared on his body as the sword was manifested, tearing through everything in its path as it stuck to the 7th string. All 7 strings on the magic zither vibrated violently. Boundless notes were unleashed as if a devil was howling. The 7 swords rang and unleashed terrifying light, shrouding the instrument, trying to pin the retaliating demonic will power down on the instrument. Pei Min stepped forward and fired the 8th sword himself. His surroundings roared and howled as everything turned dark and severe. The peach flowers in the forest wilted quickly, and everything seemed dead. Pei Min seemed to have seen an overbearing figure playing the instrument. All 7 strings sounded as that figure put one finger down. A crisp sound was heard as all 7 swords shattered at the same time. The suppressed demonic will was unleashed within an instant, bursting with harrowing might and banged into Pei Min, who was moving forward. Boom! Pei Min grunted as a rumble was heard. Sharp, ringing sounds were emanated as he was thrown away like a sword flying straight, leaving a deep gash on the ground. PFFTT. Pei Min spat up blood. Yet all that was seen in the eyes of those watching him was solemn respect. While it was still only 7 notes, the effort was nonetheless very commendable. He had wanted to break through the limit of 7, which drove him to suppress the demonic sound with his swords. That was seen to be an impressively overwhelming feat. Pei Min intended to suppress the tune of the demonic emperor with his swords. While he had failed, his resolve remained apparent. It was just like what he said to Xie Qingshan. While his chances of failing remained, he had tried. A figure headed straight for the magic zither, before anyone was able to react, after Pei Min was thrown back. That figure was moving at extreme speeds. It was as if he had burst right through space itself, and appearing right before the instrument. He extended his arm, and the powerful will of the great path of space burst forth. He waved, and the instrument resounded within an instant. Jiang Tai. All who saw him turned their gaze forward solemnly again. Jiang Tai of the Jiang clan of Crimson Dragon City was known to have a body inherently suited for practicing the ways of the Great Path. He was proficient in space abilities, and it was rumored that many years ago, that the Jiang clan had descended from a Ren Huang. Jiang Tai was extremely renowned in Crimson Dragon City. He and Luo Yang were both known as the 2 geniuses of the city, and both of them were ranked in the regional king ranking. Powerful will of the great path of space burst around him. Rings of space shone around him. The raging demonic might seem to have shot right through his body. He extended his hand, and then plucked the string on the instrument remotely. A sound from the magic zither was heard once again. The feat of manipulating the instrument remotely spoke volumes of Jiang Tai's space powers. It was a feat seen as no less than terrifying. If that had been an opponent instead of an instrument, he would have been able to attack his opponent directly from a distance, without any regard for the distance between them. The rings of the great path of space continued to circle him. He continued to pluck the strings on the instrument, with his body getting increasingly close to it with every attempt. There seemed to be an image of the great path of space, right before him when he stepped out. Demonic aura bombarded him, yet it was all devoured by that image and broken. Those powers enabled all to sense the extent of his powers. However, despite Jiang Tai's strength, the raging demonic power brought forth when he plucked the 7th string shattered said image right away. Jiang Tai had failed as well. Luo Yang, Yu Shifei, and Xie Qingshan made their attempts after he was done. However, while all of those ranked on the regional king ranking had been able to make the instrument produce 7 tones, none of them were able to make it further. It was as if 7 notes was the limit of the instrument itself, and that limit was something unbreakable. Xing Kai emerged as well. The aura on him gushed with great force. He looked like a god of war when he walked imposingly to the instrument. He attacked the instrument without reserve. The rings of the great path bombarded the magic zither, causing it to produce notes while shaking furiously at the same time. However, Xing Kai disregarded the instrument's rattling altogether, continuing to attack with imposing force. He was also thrown behind after 7 attempts, and he had truly been overwhelming and unforgiving. So the magic zither continues to dominate in this year's peach banquet, many noted to themselves. By then, every single person who had received the peach invitation had attempted, except for Yi Futian. Even if Yi Futian were to try, everyone thought the end result would be the same as all the previous attempts. The magic zither was deemed a lost cause. Everyone wondered what kind of treasures would be presented in the banquet instead. Many turned their eyes to Yi Futian, who was sitting, seemingly without any intention of getting up. So he is not even going to try then, some thought. While all of them who tried had done little but pluck the strings on the instrument, the attempts nonetheless gave the spectators insights. For example, those who were ranked on the regional king ranking were apparently more exceptional than everyone else. As such, many wanted to see how many times Yi Futian would be able to pluck the strings, wondering if he would be able to make it to the 7th string as well. You want to give it a try, City Lord Yi? Qi Shang asked. Your Highness, what Xie Qingshan said is sensible. If one were only to pluck the strings, 7 notes would indeed be the limit. While every single attendee here is an extreme genius, it remains an impossible feat to resist the will of the demonic emperor, through the will of sainthood, Yi Futian said. Qi Shang was thinking the same thing. The magic zither had remained a puzzle for many years after all. So you're saying that to master the magic zither, one has to be at Renhuang Plain then, City Lord Yi? Qi Shang asked. That seemed to be the only way to overwhelm the will of the demonic emperor. If one were to use the magic zither to play songs, I'm afraid it would be extremely difficult for anyone who is not a Renhuang. Yi Futian then continued. I would, of course, not be able to do so as well. I would be able to play a few notes at most. Mastering the instrument would be impossible. Your words hold true. A guqin left behind by a demonic emperor holds the will of said emperor. It is indeed difficult to go about mastering it, Qi Shang then added. However, even if one was unable to truly master the instrument, being able to play a song, even if just a few notes, they would be considered as having solved the puzzle with the magic zither. If you are capable of that much, you're welcome to take the instrument. I'll give it a try, Yi Futian said. He then walked towards the magic zither. Countless pairs of eyes watched Yi Futian at that moment. Everyone made their attempts, and they deemed him to have been unnecessarily flamboyant. Is he saying that his attempts will be different from the others? They wondered. Yi Futian walked towards the magic zither. Overwhelming demonic aura washed all over him, drowning him in it and eating away at his will. He seemed to have been sucked into the demonic space, arriving at yet another world. A giant demonic guqin was seen hanging in the sky. Yi Futian approached with his will, which was then encroached by the demonic will. He extended his hand, intending to touch the strings. Everyone intensely watched Yi Futian. Everyone saw him making his move, putting his hand onto the magic zither, and yet, he seemed to have no intention of plucking the strings. He had rested his hand on it. What is he doing? Everyone's eyes were filled with a peculiar expression. They were unable to fathom what he was trying to do. Yi Futian clearly knew that since the instrument had a will of the demonic emperor left within it, it was utterly impossible for them to simply overcome it with their willpower. The recoil would definitely be immense. As such, even the most powerful of those who tried had only been able to pluck the strings 7 times. And that had been the limit. That was unless the one plucking the strings were to be a Renhuang. If he were to repeat what everyone else before had attempted, it would not yield much of a result, despite the effort being useful to temper his spiritual will to a certain degree. The end result would be the same. The sound of the guqin was something imbued with the emotions of the one playing the instrument. Every single note had an expression, illustrating the inner feelings of the one playing it, that had nothing to do with status, as well as if one practiced demonic ways or not. The magic zither had a spirit, and mastering it required one to be able to comprehend the instrument's will itself. Yi Futian did not resist the flowing demonic will power within the magic zither. His spiritual will was quickly encroached by the demonic will, as demonic might enveloped his entire being. He seemed to have been encroached by demonic powers right there and then. Dark demonic light shimmered on his face. Demonic aura slithered and coursed all over his body. Qi Shang was baffled at the scene. He and Yu Shifei, who was by his side, looked at each other. Both were able to see the surprise in each other's eyes. Both of them were proficient in the art of the guqin, so they were able to tell what Yi Futian intended to do. Yi Futian did not pluck the strings right away. He listened instead. He was listening to the will of the magic zither itself. Nobody had tried to so in the past. Yet at that very moment, both Qi Shang and Yu Shifei came to a realization. It was as if both realized that they should have done so a long time ago. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Demonic sound howled and circled his ears as it continued to invade Yi Futian's will. Demonic sound howled and circled his ears as it continued to invade Yi Futian's will. Terrifying demonic aura flowed around his body. It was as if his entire being was about to be controlled by that demonic will. Dark demonic aura coursed about on his handsome face. Dark light shimmered around his pupils, as if he was about to be turned. His robe billowed and dark peach flowers dropped. His hair remained silver. That handsome face of his seemed like that of a devil, shining with a pharaoh grace, as if he was no longer himself. Countless pairs of eyes found on the mountain were all glued to Yi Futian. Everyone seemed to have felt something. Is he sensing the will of the magic zither on his own? He is not afraid of being devoured by the demonic will instead? Duan Wuji of Emperor Dong's palace lowered his voice and asked, seeing his change. He chuckled and understood why it was Yi Futian, who had been able to acquire Emperor Kua's lineage back in the ruins. He dared to venture into territories no one dared to. What Yi Futian pulled was extremely bold. Terrifying demonic will power was imbued within the magic zither, capable of encroaching and even attacking the will of others. Saints, who were all-powerful beings, would not have tolerated the thought of having their will affected and controlled. So their first instinct at facing the magic zither was to fight it, cutting down on the demonic will's influence on them, and even suppressing the demonic will to master the instrument. That was the most common method after all. Even any wanted to reach out. They would have instinctively shunned such thoughts soon enough. The result of doing such a thing would probably be something out of their control, after all. An example being, what if one's will was encroached so badly that one was left with a permanent, unrecoverable trauma? There was also the concern of recoil from the demonic will affecting them. Such methods of wading against the current were totally against human instincts and extremely risky. However, that was what Yi Futian did. Although many present would not have done so themselves, they nonetheless vaguely felt that he might be doing the right thing when they saw Yi Futian putting such thoughts into action. They, however, wondered if he would be able to bear the will of a demonic emperor. This is interesting, Xie Qingshan said. While Yi Futian had not gone to directly suppress the demonic will and pluck the strings as they had, what he pulled was something that had more thought in it and was more daring. It was no surprise why Yi Futian would emerge to become the most brilliant young man found in Crimson Dragon Realm. Everyone knew that if Yi Futian were to be the same as they were, he would not have succeeded, and he knew that much. As such, he did what he did. However, what enabled him to do so was the backing of his imperial will. If he were to run into any accidents, he was still confident that he was able to shake himself free from the demonic will instead of completely succumbing to it. Demonic will coursed about Yi Futian's body, which was at the central region of the Peach Banquet, held in the vast divine mountain. He looked as if he was turning into a demon himself. The demonic light became increasingly intense, and Yi Futian felt as if he was on the verge of being enthralled by the demonic will. He seemed to have heard ancient notes within that demonic world, which sounded like they came from an extremely faraway place, while at the same, right beside him, those leaping notes seemed to be out to completely control his will. Yi Futian maintained a sliver of consciousness, as the demonic might, which was getting increasingly terrifying, rolled about. Yi Futian seemed to be on the verge of turning into a demon. His pitch-black demonic eyes glittered with a hint of comprehension. He lifted his hand and got near the magic zither. His fingers were slightly curved. Terrifying, stifling aura was felt in his surroundings at that moment. Look out! A figure at a faraway corner of the mountain was seen. Everyone seemed to have sensed something, and all gathered their powers to resist. Yi Futian's fingers then struck the strings on the instrument shortly after. When the demonic sound was heard, formless demonic light washed all over the place. It was as if devastating demonic rings shot out all around. Boom! The mighty ones brought their towering auras to bear. The demonic might washed all over the place. Gales swept their vicinity, and the peach forest wilted in mere moments, turning into a pitch-black demonic world. Many were thrown several steps back. Rumbling sounds were heard, as they unleashed their own will powers to resist. However, all of that hardly lasted for a single moment. Everyone then turned their gaze back to Yi Futian. His fingers were moving away from the magic zither. He backed away, and the demonic might on him gradually subsided as if nothing had happened. That bit of demonic sound was totally different from the simple notes produced when everyone was attempting to pluck the strings before. That was the true tune of demonic sounds. It was apparent that he did it. Although it lasted for only a brief moment, he had played the magic zither for what it truly was. Furthermore, he was able to make it out in one piece. Everyone turned to look at Yi Futian. If things were to proceed according to the conversation between Qi Shang and Yi Futian, then the instrument that had been around for many peach banquets would no longer remain. It had finally found its master. The magic zither has been in the royal palace for many years, and there has never been anyone capable of fathoming its workings. Or should I say, there had never been anyone capable of such metal. City Lord Yi, you have succeeded in finding out the secret of the instrument and playing it. Per what I've said before, this guqin shall now be yours, Qi Shang smiled and said. Yi Futian did not refuse. The guqin of a demonic emperor was a Renhuang-level treasure, and there was no way he would have rejected such a precious item. Furthermore, there was not any catch to taking the magic zither. Thank you, Your Highness. Yi Futian cupped his hands and said. A holiness of nirvana dropped from the sky. The guqin case materialized and emitted dazzling light, shrouding the guqin and containing it within. The case itself was a treasure as well, evident from the fact that it was capable of containing the will of the magic zither within. He waved his hand, and the case flew towards Yi Futian. Yi Futian took it over, and then stored it within his storage ring, before turning around and going back to where he stood. The magic zither was officially his. The magic zither has been around for several peach banquets, and it finally found its master. I'd call this a case closed one way or another, Qi Shang smiled and said. It was as if giving away a Renhuang-level treasure was something worth celebrating to him. We shall have the second gift prepared for the very next day. The 1,000-word tablet, Qi Shang said. He then looked far away, ordering, please. Rumbles were heard in the sky as soon as he finished. An item flew from the mountain, zipping past the heads of the crowd, and coming to the center of the banquet. Boom! A booming rumble was heard, and everyone saw a huge tablet appear before them. The tablet looked like a chessboard, and ancient symbols coursed on it. The piece looked mystical, and it seemed to harbor immense power. The 1,000-word tablet, per its namesake, has thousands of maxims carved on it. It is meant for supplementing one's training, and one is able to store powers of the great path within. A Renhuang created it. Qi Shang's voice was heard again as he addressed the crowd. If there is anyone in the crowd capable of comprehending the maxims within, and melding what is learned into your own methods, we shall have sparring sessions within 2 hours for anyone who is capable of developing what they have learned. The one who is capable of developing the deepest comprehension will be welcome to take the tablet away. Things were different than with the magic zither previously. The guqin had never found its master in the past several banquets, and it was finally taken away by Yi Futian. The tablet itself was not a precious, but the inscriptions on it were of extreme value, as they were creations of a Renhuang. Furthermore, someone would definitely be able to take it. However, taking such a piece away would not be an easy feat. All who had attended the peach banquet that day were all renowned, formidable figures. All of them were top-notch geniuses in Crimson Dragon Realm. Anyone intending to take it away would be required to overwhelm others through their power of comprehension. Such formless competition was what the peach banquet was truly meant for. It served more than a gift to a worthy person, as it was also a piece enabling all present to see just how extraordinary the top-notch geniuses of the realm were. Furthermore, all top-notch figures present were people who willingly attended the banquet. In all the past banquets held, only a handful of the invitees chose not to attend the event instead. The banquet was of such prominence that those who did not receive an invitation intended to fight their way up, just like how Xiangzhe did. Please help yourselves, Qi Shang said with a smile. The tablet stood before them, and one figure after another shot into the air, heading towards the huge tablet. Yi Futian did the same. He came before the tablet, and everyone behind him followed suit. That was an opportunity to further their training, after all. Of course, it would have been delightful for Yi Futian if he were to be able to bag the tablet, as it would have enabled him to study the inscriptions in detail. But 2 hours was what he had for now. Futian gazed at the huge tablet before him. Ancient symbols spun around the tablet, as if they were about to shoot out of it. Dazzling light shot from his eyes as he activated the freedom meditation, seeping his spiritual will into the tablet. He seemed to have immersed himself within the world of the tablet within an instant. He stood inside, and countless symbols danced in the air. Every single symbol seemed to have been imbued with might of the Great Path, yet none had the will of the Great Path in them. It was as if the will was meant to be something to be immersed in them by the ones studying them. The symbols were meant to be infused through his perception. Sword, Futian willed, and he looked at the Maxim inscriptions as if they were swords. In an instant, those inscriptions seemed to have ceased being just inscriptions, and they looked like sword-shaped ancient symbols instead. Over 1,000 sword-shaped ancient symbols circled in the air, and looked extremely sharp, pulsing with terrifying sword will. They felt as if they were a towering, frightening sword matrix, while at the same time, feeling like a waterfall of swords, gushing at his will. Damn it! Futian was alerted deep down all of a sudden. The inscriptions of swords dropped vertically, and attacked his spiritual willpower within the tablet, shattering it on the spot. It was as if they had torn through the tablet, and rushed inside his head. Futian shut his eyes instantly, intending to shake the attack off. However, that scene seemed to have lingered in his mind. He retreated immediately and grunted, finding blood at the side of his mouth. Everyone around him was frightened. Xia Qingyuan and the others flashed and came to his side asking, "What happened?" They were not the only ones doing so. Many before the tablet turned their eyes to Futian as well. Their expressions were puzzled. The ones standing far away at the mountain were rather baffled as well. While many were thrown off instantly, Futian was the only one who showed that much of a reaction. It seemed as if he was severely injured. The case did not seem to meld well with his prior performance. He should not have looked that weak. However, none of them knew that the huge reaction from Futian was a result of reaching planes higher and more intense than the others. That had been his advantage over the others. Yet that advantage almost ended up injuring him severely. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Futian stood firmly and shook his head. "It's nothing." Futian stood firmly and shook his head. "It's nothing." He looked up, and his gaze fell upon the stone steel. Once he received the will of this 1,000-proverb steel, he would be able to form proverbs of pure will and integrate them into his sword. When he did that, it would be much stronger than if he was relying on his own spiritual willpower. If he could fully understand it, then he could store his own will inside the 1,000 proverbs. Once he released it, would it burst forth with a power far beyond his own spiritual willpower? This time, he intended to visualize all of the 1,000 proverbs directly, but he could not withstand such a high-level endeavor. It looked like he would have to go a little bit slower. He walked forward. There were many people around him. Xiangze was in front of him. He squinted at Futian, then averted his gaze. He looked back at the huge stone steel and whispered, "You should not be doing this." He was currently a celebrated figure in the Crimson Dragon realm. He had been named Lord of Qinya City, and his name echoed throughout the realm. He had even killed a Nirvana-level figure from Emperor Xiang's realm. He had made Xiang Nan have to leave the Crimson Dragon realm and return to Emperor Xiang's realm to ask for help, and made him cross over a vast distance to see what was going on. Even given Futian's previous performance, he had not been able to see his true power. But the fact that he was able to obtain the magic zither proved that he was brave and mighty. From what he could see, Futian would be a thorny opponent indeed. And the previous scene had been slightly different than he imagined it would be. Futian looked at Xiangze. He smiled but did not respond. Instead, he continued walking towards the huge stone steel. The ancient words on the stone steel were mysterious and intriguing, and contained fantastic rule power. Futian's spiritual will entered it once again, but this time, he did not receive the will of the words. He only saw the endless characters that they were made up of. Is this a matrix of the Great Path? Yi Futian wondered. Run Huang had probably carved the 1,000-word proverbs on the stone stele. A Run Huang-level figure had carved the stele, and now the power of the Great Path was contained within its characters. It seemed that every character contained a powerful will. There seemed to be some similarity between this and the Sword of Cassiopea. But what was different was that he had formed the revolution of the Great Path rule power out of the ancient words. It was extremely frightening. Yi Futian perceived the 1,000-word proverbs and tried to form a Sword of Cassiopea. One of the swords did form inside his life palace. Yi Futian felt its will and frowned slightly. Something was wrong. The will that this character contained seemed ordinary, not extraordinary. It seemed kind of like the Three Brothers' 9 seals of spiritual power. But it was a little bit different. Every single ancient character had a special mark on it that could attract will. Thinking of this, Yi Futian did not try and perceive each of the 10,000 words. He just perceived one among them. Ren Huang had created the 1,000-word proverbs. When someone reached the Ren Huang level, they had already proven themselves before the Great Path and transcended. The Tao begets the heavens, the earth, and all things. In the space of a single thought, the Tao of all things could make a full revolution. The union of humans and Tao created unlimited vitality and endless potential, as vast as the world and as bright as the sun and moon. Since Ren Huang had created them, these 1,000-word proverbs contained true will within them. Since they contained endless potential, these ancient characters were suitable for any law power. Yi Futian was completely lost in self-perception, and he forgot everything in the outside world. He was immersed in the 1,000-character proverb stele. Many powerful figures were standing in front of the stele as well, cultivating and perceiving it. All of them had different understandings of it. Below the place where the peach banquet was taking place, everyone was gazing up at them. And many eyes were watching from Divine Mountain as well. Half a day was too short a time, especially when trying to perceive a 1,000-character proverb. It was impossible to get all the details of it. Everything that had been created by Ren Huang had been done so through the Great Path. Even the things that he had created so easily would be difficult for even a Nirvana-level cultivator to create. However, the people at the peach banquet were all top figures. Even if they could not understand all the will within it, they could still comprehend a lot of it. But they did not know who among them could understand the most. Those who had received a peach invitation naturally attracted a lot of attention. Luo Yang, Jiang Taiyi, and Yu Shifei are the most outstanding talents of Crimson Dragon City. I wonder what kind of performance they will give at the peach banquet, said an old man on Divine Mountain. He looked out at the stone stele. He saw that a fiery mark appeared before Luo Yang, that radiating brilliant light. On the other side of the banquet, there was an incredibly powerful swordsman's aura. It was Peimen ancient characters in the form of swords formed around him. They looked like they were sword marks. An ear-splitting noise came out of the air as terrifying sword will roared. Peimen was even able to control the sword marks flowing around him. It seemed like he was trying to simulate the Great Path rule power of the 1,000-word proverbs. A terrible halo appeared in front of Xingkai. The will of Great Path was within it, and it was extremely overbearing. The halo seemed to be filled with destructive power. Everyone was trying to work as hard as they could to perceive the stele and use it in their cultivation. They knew that they could not completely perceive the 1,000-word proverbs in such a short amount of time, but as long as they could perceive more than anyone else, they could take it with them and work on slowly understanding it. That would be equivalent to Ren Huang level combat magic. Moreover, it could make any of their law powers much stronger. Qi Shang was sitting there satisfied. He was the only one drinking. All the figures in front of the stele were standing or sitting on mats on the ground. The will that was forming around them was growing stronger. As time went on, the will of the Great Path flowed between heaven and earth, whistling without end. He took a sip of wine and looked at Yi Futian, the one who had gotten the magic zither. He saw that he was the one who was moving the least. In fact, he was not moving at all. This made him a little suspicious. Was this guy even still perceiving? Could it be that he was not interested in the 1,000-character proverbs at all? Beside Yi Futian, many different wills had formed around Xia Qingyuan, Yi Wuchen, and the others. They were obviously all still perceiving. He shifted his gaze and looked back at Yu Shifei. A look of warmth came into his eyes. Without anyone realizing it, half a day passed. Qi Shang smiled and said, "Time is up, everyone." Everyone still seemed to be immersed in the stone steel. But when they heard Qi Shang's voice, they gradually came out of their cultivation postures. Whoosh! There was a loud noise as the 1,000-word proverb steel flew away. Everyone returned unhappily to their original places. It seemed like everything had returned to how it was at the start. Anyone interested in the 1,000-word proverb steel may exchange views. However, we are only looking at how much of the 1,000-word proverb you have perceived. So this is just a simple exchange, not a true battle. You may only make simple attacks through the power of the 1,000-word proverb steel. Moreover, if a saint of true self faces a doctrine saint, you must control your strength and keep it to the level of a doctrine saint, said Qi Shang. Only this way can we truly test how well you have understood the 1,000-word proverb. Everyone was silent as they looked at each other. Qi Shang watched this scene with a smile. Everyone here can participate. He was naturally referring to those that the guests had brought with them, the ones who had not received peach invitations. But the ones who had received peach invitations were the most outstanding figures. It would be impossible for someone to be more outstanding than them. The one who finally won the 1,000-word prover steel would be one of the ones who had received a peach invitation. Him letting the others participate was just for his amusement. After all, the peach banquet was just a banquet, so there were no rigid rules. Here you could see some of the most powerful figures in the Crimson Dragon realm of this generation. At that moment, a figure strode forward from behind Xing Kai. This person was officially the Saint King of Gai's younger brother Huayi. Even though he had not received a peach invitation, he was still one of the top talents of the Crimson Dragon realm. It was just that compared to the heroes who had gathered here, like Xing Kai, that he came up a bit short. Who would be the worst among these people like Huayi and Xiaqing Yuan? Huayi looked over at Yi Futian. He had come from the ancient imperial city. He wanted to see just how powerful Yi Futian truly was. His teacher was the Saint King of Gai, one of the top figures of the Crimson Dragon realm. He was naturally incredibly proud. The only one that he was willing to follow was Xing Kai. I hope to find out just how much Lord Yi has understood, said Huayi. He had been perceiving the steel for half a day, so he could use it in his attacks. He wanted to know whether Yi Futian would be able to withstand his attacks. Everyone from Qinya City looked at him. Yi Futian was just about to go over there, when another figure stepped forward. He was dressed all in white. His hair was tied back, and he wore a feathered crown on his head. He strode forward, looked at Huayi and said, "You did not receive a peach invitation. You just came here with Xing Kai. And yet you directly challenge someone who did receive a peach invitation. First, you must prove that you are worthy." Huayi swept his gaze over the man. He did not recognize him. Other than Yi Futian and Yu Sheng, who were both very famous, Princess Xiaqing Yuan of Emperor Xia's realm was the only other person from Qinya City who was well known. "Who are you?" asked Huayi. He looked a little bit indifferent. His teacher was the Saint King of Gai, and he was famous throughout the ancient imperial city. He was an outstanding talent. How could someone who had come along from Qinya City compare with him? "I am Gu Donglu of Qinya City." The white-robed figure continued forward. The two of them came to the empty space in the middle of the banquet hall, but they did not stop. They continued forward. Huayi stepped forward with a cold expression. He had been perceiving for half a day, and had formed some 1,000-word proverb law power for his attacks. He only had enough for one, and he had hoped to use it on Yi Futian. He wanted to see how strong the Lord of Qinya City was. But some unknown person from Qinya City had challenged him. This was most displeasing. However, if Gu Donglu wanted to take this attack in Yi Futian's place, he would have to give it to him. "I hope you can bear it," said Huayi. As he went forward, a powerful spatial storm swept up from his body. Brilliant spatial law seals floated around him. He lifted his arms slightly, as if he could launch his attack at any moment. Gu Donglu did not stop either but continued forward. Ancient characters formed all around him suddenly. They were ancient characters of the Great Path. and they resonated with heaven and earth. There was a hint of the will of the 1,000-word proverb within them. This made many people look on with surprise. Divine light was shining from Gudonglu as well, making the will of the great path flow wildly through the ancient characters. His aura was getting stronger and stronger. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.